You know, there's a source of almost unlimited energy sitting inside you right now. It's called anger. For years, we've all been told it's this toxic emotion we have to get rid of. But what if that's completely wrong? What if the world's most elite performers have actually learned how to weaponize their dark side for fuel? Okay, let's really dive into this.
So here's our game plan. We're going to break down this thing called the dark energy protocol. We'll start by challenging everything you've heard about anger. Then, we'll get into the actual neuroscience behind it. We'll look at how legends like Michael Jordan and David Goggins used it as a weapon, and we'll wrap up with a framework for how you can actually control this incredibly powerful force.
All right, first up, the anger paradox. This whole section is really about questioning the entire script we've been handed about forgiveness and dealing with negative emotions.
Think about it. The self-help industry, a lot of modern therapy, it's all built on one central idea. Holding on to anger is toxic. You've got to forgive and forget to find peace, to move on. But what if that advice is actually making you weaker? What if it's holding you back? This really shows the two completely opposite ways of thinking. Over on the left, you've got the forgiveness script. You know, let it go, heal, find your peace. But on the right, that's the mindset of the apex predators of the world. They never forgive, and they never forget. They don't just move on from being slighted, they turn it into rocket fuel for the long haul. And this quote just nails the core argument. The whole idea is that if you're only relying on positive thinking, it's like having a really fragile battery. The second things get brutally hard, it just dies on you. This darker energy, though, it's presented as a nuclear reactor, a much more resilient, powerful source for when you're really in the trenches.
Okay, let's move on and see how this all connects. Because this isn't just some edgy philosophy. The people who advocate for this ground the whole idea in the hard science of our own biology. We're talking about the neuroscience of rage.
So to get this, you first need to understand something called approach motivation. See, most of our negative emotions, like fear or sadness, are what you'd call avoidance emotions. They make us want to run away from stuff. But neuroscience shows that anger is totally different. It's an approach emotion. It doesn't make you want to back down, it makes you want to move toward the problem and smash right through it. When that anger switch gets flipped, your body goes through this radical change. I mean, look at this. You get a massive surge of adrenaline. Your rest and digest system just shuts right down. Basically, your entire body goes into pure action mode. It creates this intense hyperfocus, it biologically eliminates fear, and it can even make your brain ignore signals that you're physically exhausted. It's a biological override designed for one thing: confrontation.
And if we dig even deeper, there's a specific part of the brain at the heart of all this, the anterior mid-cingulate cortex, or AMCC. Neuroscientists like Dr. Andrew Huberman have talked about this a lot. It's basically the brain's hub for willpower, for grit, for tenacity. Studies show this area lights up like a Christmas tree during difficult tasks. It's literally the engine in your head that says, yeah, this is hard, but it's worth it. Keep going. Okay, so enough theory. Let's see this in action. For our first case study, we're going to look at an absolute master of this protocol, Michael Jordan. The guy didn't just use the anger he received. He went out and actively manufactured it. And this quote from Jordan himself, man, it just gets right to the heart of it. For him, taking things personally wasn't a flaw, it was his core operating system. He weaponized every perceived insult, turning every single game into a personal battle. He was convinced that this gave him an edge that no opponent could ever hope to match.
And you know what's crazy? He was incredibly systematic about it. This wasn't just random rage. He had a repeatable 4-step process. He'd find something totally neutral, then convince himself it was a deep personal insult, generate this intense anger from that made-up story, and then just channel all of that rage to not just win, but to completely destroy his opponent.
And trust me, this wasn't a one-off thing. The man kept files. This table shows a few of the classics. There's this famous story about a player named LeBradford Smith who had a good game against him. Smith never said a word to Jordan afterward, but Jordan just invented a story that Smith had walked by and mockingly said, "Nice game, Mike." And the result? The very next night, Jordan dropped 36 points on him in the first half. He did the same thing over and over. It was a conscious, psychological strategy. All right, let's look at our second case study. So if Michael Jordan manufactured fuel from external sources, people like retired Navy SEAL and ultramarathoner David Goggins manufacture it from within, by archiving his own pain.
His signature mental tool is something he calls the cookie jar. And the concept is actually pretty simple. Instead of trying to run from your past trauma, Goggins says you should archive it. Every failure, every insult, every single time someone told you that you weren't good enough, it all goes into the jar. Its purpose is to be a source of strength for when you are at your absolute breaking point.
And this quote from Goggins just explains the raw power of this technique. He says that when you're really suffering, when your mind is screaming at you to quit, you don't reach for happy thoughts. No, you reach into that cookie jar. You pull out a memory of a time you overcame these impossible odds, and you use it as pure, unfiltered dark energy to push right through the pain.
Now this all sounds incredibly intense, right? Which brings us to the final and maybe the most important section. How is this energy actually controlled? Because this is the critical difference between a real strategy and just destructive chaos.
This slide makes the key distinction crystal clear. On the left, you've got emotional chaos, losing your temper, making dumb, impulsive decisions, screaming at people. That's weak. But on the right, you have weaponized rage. It's silent, it's strategic, and it's completely under control. The idea is to feel the anger, but never let it control you. You direct it, like a war general directing troops on a battlefield.
The psychologist Jordan Peterson actually provides a useful framework for this, and he pulls it from the work of Carl Jung. He calls it shadow integration. Your shadow is basically all the parts of yourself you'd rather not admit exist. Your capacity for aggression, for rage, even for evil. And the goal isn't to destroy this monster inside you, but to acknowledge that it's there and then learn how to control it. Peterson's whole argument is really summarized in this one quote. He says that a person who's incapable of doing harm isn't actually virtuous. They're just harmless. They're weak. He argues that true strength, true virtue, comes from having the capacity to be dangerous, to be a monster, but having that capacity so well integrated and controlled that you choose not to be. Now, it's really important to note that this is a contested idea. Other Jungian scholars argue that Peterson is misinterpreting the original concept. For them, true shadow integration isn't about just putting a leash on a monster, it's about civilizing it, transforming that raw energy into something constructive and positive. The goal isn't just control, it's transformation. It's a key debate.
And this brings us right back to the core argument of the dark energy protocol. This slide just sums it all up perfectly. Positive motivation is presented as that fragile battery. It's unreliable, especially when things get tough. Dark energy, on the other hand, the kind you draw from pain and anger, is framed as a nuclear reactor, a powerful, resilient source of fuel that actually gets stronger under pressure.
So, we'll leave you with this question. Is the real path to peak performance found in letting go of the past and constantly searching for peace? Or is it found by acknowledging the darker parts of our own nature and learning to harness the immense power of the monster that lives inside all of us? The answer? Well, that probably depends on who you ask.